The piercing wail of sirens cut through the serene quiet of the small town, nestled among wide-open fields and towering ancient oaks. It was a day like any other in late autumn, the air tinged with the crispness of fallen leaves and the earthy scent of impending rain. But the tranquility shattered as emergency vehicles skidded to a stop in front of a weathered stone house. This house belonged to Henry, a 72-year-old retired postman with eyes that held both the warmth of kindness and the weight of years gone by. But the real heart of the home was Scout, his Doberman, a guardian whose loyalty was unmatched. Since Margaret, Henry's beloved wife, passed away 5 years ago, life had never felt the same. The rooms of the house were steeped in memories, laughter, shared meals, quiet nights by the fire. Now, silence ruled, broken only by the soft padding of Scout's paws or the low hum of the radio that Henry kept on to ward off the stillness. Scout was more than just a pet. He was a lifeline, a watchful protector who sensed Henry's every mood and shadowed him loyally. Each day, the two embarked on their morning ritual, a slow, deliberate walk to the end of the driveway to fetch the newspaper, Scout's lean form pressed close to Henry, ever alert, ever present. This morning, the sunlight dappled through the golden leaves as Henry paused, smiling at Scout's playful nudge. But the ordinary peace would soon dissolve into a nightmare. Hidden deep behind the walls of the old house, a frayed electrical wire hissed and sputtered, a danger unnoticed through years of wear. The spark leaped to dry wooden beams, igniting them with a fierce, crackling energy. At first, it was just a whisper of smoke, curling upwards like a spectral ribbon. Scout's keen nose caught the change instantly. His head shot up, ears pricking as he let out a sharp, warning bark. Henry, lost in his thoughts, looked down, eyes clouded with confusion until he saw the smoke. It grew rapidly, no longer a whisper but a dark, choking plume. Panic surged in his chest, squeezing out the air. He shuffled backward, trying to remember what to do, but the heat surged, pressing against his skin, stealing the breath from his lungs. Outside, neighbors who had known Henry for decades gathered, their shouts a frantic backdrop to the scene unfolding. The fire's growl deepened, fierce and insatiable, devouring curtains, spreading across walls once adorned with cherished photographs and heirlooms. The flames reached higher, their light a cruel mimicry of the afternoon sun. Scout barked again, louder, circling Henry as if to herd him toward safety. But Henry's age betrayed him. His body, once strong, now frail, refused to respond quickly. The fire roared louder, a beast consuming the life he'd built piece by piece. Henry fell to his knees, gasping for air as smoke billowed around him. Scout's eyes, sharp and full of a primal understanding, locked onto his. He darted to Henry's side, wedging his body under his arm, trying to push him forward. "Come on, boy. We've got to get out," Henry whispered hoarsely, though each word came out choked and cracked. He tried to stand, but his legs gave way. Scout's growl deepened, and with a powerful tug, he managed to pull Henry a few precious inches closer to the door. The heat scorched them both. The house groaned as beams cracked and splintered under the pressure. The firefighters arrived, their boots pounding against the pavement, shouts blending with the roar of water hoses and the metallic clatter of gear. But in those seconds, time stretched unbearably. Scout turned back, his eyes flicking between Henry and the encroaching inferno. He bolted toward the hallway, where flames clawed at the walls like hungry beasts, eyes full of defiance. Smoke coiled through the air, thick and blinding, turning the once cozy home into a maze of suffocating darkness. Henry's vision blurred, his chest tightening with every breath that drew in more smoke than oxygen. A sharp sting prickled his eyes, forcing them shut against the sting. He could hear the pounding of footsteps outside, voices shouting his name. But they felt distant, as if he were listening through a heavy, damp cloth. The world was closing in. Scout, for bristling, stood beside Henry, pressing his lean frame against his side, urging him forward. But Henry's body refused to move, muscles frozen by shock and exhaustion. The fire hissed as it consumed wooden beams and old upholstery, casting flickering, nightmarish shadows across the room. Memories of years spent within these walls, a life shared with Margaret, laughter with friends, flashed through Henry's mind, each moment threatened by the hungry blaze. "Henry, are you in there?" A firefighter's voice boomed from outside, cutting through the crackle and roar. The front door was kicked open, letting in a gust of fresh air that fueled the fire momentarily, making it surge forward like an enraged beast. The heat bore down, but the brief rush of cool air revived Henry just enough to feel the terror seeping back into his bones. Scout barked again, a deep, commanding sound that reverberated through Henry's chest. It was a bark that said, "Hold on. I'm here." He darted to the door, barking sharply at the firefighters who, through the smoke, caught a glimpse of the man slumped on the floor. The urgency kicked them into motion, shouts of, "We have a visual," breaking the chaotic rhythm of the scene. The Doberman's eyes locked onto Henry as one firefighter pushed inside, crawling low, hand outstretched. Scout lunged back to Henry's side, nudging him with a nose made raw by the smoke, pawing at his arm as if willing him to move. Henry's hand twitched, finding Scout's collar, fingers curling weakly around it. But before he could react further, another creak split the air like thunder. The ceiling beams above groaned and splintered. "No!" one of the firefighters shouted, eyes wide as they glimpsed the sudden movement. The fire snapped, an explosion of sparks shooting out as part of the ceiling collapsed, blocking the front door in a tangle of flaming wood and debris. Scout barked fiercely, jumping back but not away from Henry. The air was suffocating, the temperature nearly unbearable. Yet, in that moment, Scout's eyes found Henry's again, and there was something fierce in them, something that refused to let go. A second firefighter smashed through a side window, the shatter of glass a brief sound of hope. The team outside worked with frantic urgency, spraying water and shouting commands to contain the blaze long enough to get them out. "Scout! Boy! Go!" Henry whispered, the words almost lost in the roar, but Scout did not move away. Instead, he pressed close, shifting to brace against Henry as the firefighter from the window crawled over the debris, reaching for them. A hand gripped Henry's shoulder, pulling him away from the flames, but Henry's grip on Scout's collar tightened. "Not without him," Henry gasped, eyes burning not just from smoke but from tears of fear and love. The firefighter nodded, understanding that in this battle, man and dog were one. With a heave, he pulled them both toward the broken window, Scout pushing and pulling at Henry's side, his bark steady and determined. The roar of the fire seemed to peak as they broke free into the chill of the open air. Neighbors gasped, some reaching out as Henry, soot-streaked and trembling, was pulled to safety, Scout leaping beside him and planting himself protectively in front. The house, with its memories and relics, was ablaze now, but Henry's heart clenched not for what was lost, but for the dog who saved him. Scout, eyes scanning the crowd, sat by Henry's side, his body quivering but unyielding. He had done what his heart commanded, protected the man who was his world. The blaze continued to rage, the heat pressing against Henry's back even as he gasped for fresh air. Firefighters surged forward, their shouts blending into a symphony of urgency. Water sprayed in powerful jets, hitting the inferno with hissing, angry steam. Yet, in that sea of chaos, Henry's gaze stayed fixed on Scout, who stood by his side, eyes wide and alert. One of the firefighters turned to Henry, kneeling. "Sir, we need to check you out. You might have smoke inhalation," he said, concern threading through his voice. But Henry, chest heaving and heart thundering, shook his head weakly. "I'm fine." "It's him," Henry rasped, pointing to Scout, who now sat with ears perked, watching his every move. The Doberman's muzzle was streaked with ash, his sleek fur matted and singed in places. Yet he held his head high, eyes never leaving Henry's face, as if to reassure him that everything was all right now. The neighbors who had gathered kept a respectful distance, their eyes darting between the ruined home and the old man who had just been saved. Some of them knew the stories of Henry and Scout, the walks they took every morning, the quiet bond they shared. And now, seeing the dog's unwavering loyalty under such harrowing circumstances, Their hearts ached with newfound reverence. The firefighter gently insisted, guiding Henry to an ambulance parked nearby. "Just a quick checkup, sir," he said, eyes softening as he glanced at Scout. But the dog didn't move to follow until Henry nodded, a simple gesture that communicated trust. Scout trotted beside him, ever vigilant, pressing his lean body against Henry's leg as they reached the vehicle. The paramedics worked quickly, checking Henry's vitals, wiping soot from his lined face. Each breath came a little easier, though his hands still trembled with adrenaline. His eyes watered, not from the sting of smoke, but from the weight of gratitude. Scout sat at the open ambulance door, tail thumping softly against the metal floor, watching every move with an intensity that seemed almost human. Suddenly, one of the firefighters approached, a tall man with soot smudged across his cheeks. "Sir, I just wanted to say, I've seen a lot, but that dog of yours, he's something special. Not many would run back in." Henry's voice cracked as he looked at Scout. "He's more than special. He's family." He reached out a hand, shaky and pale, to scratch behind Scout's ears. The dog leaned into the touch, eyes closing for a brief moment as if absorbing Henry's relief and gratitude. But as the minutes ticked by, the reality of their loss sank in. The home that Margaret and he had built, brick by brick, was now a charred skeleton. The walls that had echoed with the sounds of shared laughter and love were reduced to embers. Henry's throat tightened with grief, but then Scout shifted, pressing his nose into Henry's hand, grounding him to the present, to the fact that they had survived. A gentle voice interrupted. "Mr. Henry, we're going to take you to the hospital for a thorough check, just to be safe." The paramedic's eyes moved to Scout, who stared back unwaveringly. "And your dog?" "He comes with me," Henry said, the firmness in his voice brooking no argument. The paramedic nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth as Scout hopped up into the ambulance, settling beside Henry with a huff, eyes flicking between the people around him, ready to protect at any moment. As the ambulance doors closed, the flames in the background began to lose their ferocity under the relentless force of water and effort. Neighbors watched as the vehicle pulled away, some wiping their eyes as the sight of Henry and Scout, a pair that refused to be separated, disappeared into the distance. The murmured conversations turned from shock to admiration, the tale of a dog who risked everything already taking root in their hearts. Inside the ambulance, Henry closed his eyes for a moment, exhaustion taking hold. But he felt the steady warmth of Scout pressed against his leg, the rhythmic thud of the dog's breathing anchoring him to a simple truth. Though they had lost much, the most important bond remained. A faint, tear-streaked smile touched Henry's lips as he whispered, "We're okay, boy. We're okay." Scout's ears flicked at the sound of his voice, and as the sirens wailed their song of urgency, he let out a small whine, soft, reassuring. It was his way of saying, "I know. I'm here." The hospital was quiet, its white halls echoing with the low hum of conversations and the occasional beep of monitors. Henry sat on the edge of the cot in his room, an oxygen mask resting on his face as he took slow, deliberate breaths. Scout sat loyally at his feet, his head resting on Henry's knee, eyes never straying from his owner's face. The room smelled of antiseptic and held the sterile chill of a place meant for healing, but Henry felt the warmth of Scout's presence like a protective blanket. Doctors had come and gone, their words a blur of medical jargon that Henry could barely grasp. Smoke inhalation, mild dehydration, rest needed. But through it all, the only thing he could truly focus on was the rise and fall of Scout's chest, the way his fur ruffled slightly with each exhale. The Doberman had refused to leave his side, even as nurses tried gently to coax him out to check Henry thoroughly. The bond between them was too fierce, too immediate, and they relented, allowing the dog to stay. A soft knock at the door drew Henry's attention. It was Mrs. Porter, an elderly neighbor who had known Henry and Margaret since their first day in town. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands clutching a paper bag. She entered slowly, placing the bag on the small table beside the bed. "I brought some of Margaret's old things. Thought they might bring you comfort," she said, her voice tremulous but kind. Scout's ears flicked in recognition, but his head stayed resting against Henry's leg. Henry's fingers reached for the bag, pulling out a knitted blanket that Margaret had made one winter, her careful stitches still holding warmth. A lump formed in his throat as memories flooded back, Margaret wrapping the blanket around him, laughing as they watched the snow fall outside, Scout curled up by their feet. He draped it over his shoulders now, the soft weight of it anchoring him in a way that no words ever could. "Thank you, Eliza," he whispered, eyes glistening as he met her gaze. She nodded, eyes darting to Scout, her lips curving into a small, grateful smile. "Everyone in town's talking about him, you know," she said, looking at Scout with a mixture of awe and affection. "A dog like that. Henry, he's a blessing." Henry's eyes fell to Scout, who finally lifted his head to lick Henry's hand. "He's my miracle," Henry said, voice cracking under the weight of emotion. The room grew quiet as both humans and the dog shared a moment wrapped in the silent acknowledgement of what they had lost and what they had managed to save. Days passed, and the town rallied behind Henry. Neighbors brought meals and shared stories of the fire, each recounting Scout's bravery with misty eyes and reverence. The story spread beyond the little town, catching the attention of local news. Soon, a reporter arrived, eager to capture the tale that had touched so many hearts. Sitting in the modest living room of Mrs. Porter's house, where he and Scout had been staying, Henry recounted the day, the tremor in his voice betraying the rawness of the memory. The camera focused on Scout, who sat regally at Henry's feet, his eyes wise and vigilant. "And what went through your mind when you realized the fire had trapped you?" the reporter asked, leaning forward. Henry paused, his fingers brushing against Scout's collar. "I thought that was the end. But this boy here, he wouldn't let that happen. It was as if he knew my life was in his paws, and he wasn't about to let go." The reporter's eyes glistened, and even the cameraman's stoic expression softened. "Scout is a hero," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Henry's lips twitched into a smile, tired but proud. "He's more than a hero. He's my reason." Scout let out a low, approving whine, and the room chuckled softly, the tension breaking like a lifted fog. The segment aired the following week, bringing an outpouring of messages from people who resonated with the story, a testament to loyalty, love, and the unyielding spirit of a dog who wouldn't give up on his person. As weeks turned into months, Henry and Scout began to rebuild, not just a home but a life touched by both tragedy and triumph. The community rallied, helping them find a new place, and neighbors came with open hands and warm hearts. Henry was overwhelmed, humbled by the support that stemmed from one act of courage on that fateful day. Scout's fame grew, but he seemed unaware, content to remain Henry's steadfast companion. The days returned to a rhythm of slow walks, shared quiet moments, and nights where Henry would watch the stars, feeling Margaret's presence and Scout's unwavering loyalty beside him. What was once lost began to be replaced, not in the material sense, but in something deeper. Henry learned that love did not perish in the flames. It was carried forward by those who remembered and by a dog who had proven that love, in its purest form, could conquer even fire. Months passed, and the rhythm of life slowly stitched itself back together. Henry, now settled into a modest new home gifted by the town's unwavering support, sat on the front porch wrapped in Margaret's old blanket. The soft hum of crickets filled the cool evening air, and beside him, Scout rested, eyes half closed but always vigilant. Every so often, Henry's mind would drift back to that fateful day. The smoke, the heat, the way Scout had refused to leave his side even when survival meant running into danger. The memories carried both pain and pride, a testament to the life they shared and the unspoken promise between them. They would face everything together. Word of Scout's heroism had spread far beyond their small town. Letters from strangers arrived weekly, each telling of how the story inspired them, of how it reminded them of love they'd lost or loyalty they cherished. Scout had become a symbol of unwavering devotion, a beacon of hope in a world where acts of pure love sometimes felt rare. The stars blinked into view, dotting the sky with their cold, familiar light. Henry took a deep breath, the crisp air filling his lungs with the smell of leaves and life. There were losses that could never be replaced, echoes of a time that would never return, but Scout was here, steadfast, loyal, a living reminder that resilience was born from love. As the night deepened, Henry closed his eyes, Margaret's memory whispering on the wind, and felt the soft press of Scout's head against his leg, a gentle weight that said, "I'm here. Always." And with that, Henry knew that whatever came next, he would face it with the unbreakable bond that had seen them through fire and beyond. In the end, the true power wasn't just in surviving. It was in the reminder that love, in all its fierce, silent strength, could carry them through anything. And as Scout settled beside him, the world felt a little brighter, illuminated by the quiet heroism of a dog's loyalty and the hope it inspired in everyone who knew their story. One afternoon, a group of school children visited, their teacher explaining that they had read about Scout and Henry. They gathered on the lawn, wide-eyed and chattering, as Henry recounted the story, his voice steady but soft, tinged with the gravity of the memory. Scout, ever patient, allowed the children to pet him, his tail thumping lightly on the ground, eyes watching Henry as if to say, "We're still here." When the children left, their laughter still ringing in the distance, Henry reached down and scratched behind Scout's ears. "You saved more than just my life, boy. You reminded me what it means to hold on." Scout's eyes met his, warm and understanding, a silent acknowledgement that no words could match. The stars blinked into view, dotting the sky with their cold, familiar light. Henry took a deep breath, the crisp air filling his lungs with the smell of leaves and life. There were losses that could never be replaced, echoes of a time that would never return, but Scout was here, steadfast, loyal, a living reminder that resilience was born from love. As the night deepened, Henry closed his eyes, Margaret's memory whispering on the wind, and felt the soft press of Scout's head against his leg, a gentle weight that said, "I'm here. Always." And with that, Henry knew that whatever came next, he would face it with the unbreakable bond that had seen them through fire and beyond. In the end, the true power wasn't just in surviving. It was in the reminder that love, in all its fierce, silent strength, could carry them through anything. And as Scout settled beside him, the world felt a little brighter, illuminated by the quiet heroism of a dog's loyalty and the hope it inspired in everyone who knew their story. It's an honor to be able to create content for you. If you want to support the channel even more, you can follow the instructions that I will leave on the pinned comment. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Love you all.